Good morning. Today I'm going to show you my technique for flattening a board. Now this looks like a relatively flat piece of 2x4. It's not what it actually is. It's not actually flat. And I'm going to show you how to determine what flat is. And I'm going to show you how to take this board and actually make it flat. What we'll be needing as we go along is a thing I call a sled, which is nothing more than a piece of MDF 3/4 inch thick. We'll be placing the workpiece on that and we'll be moving it through the thickness planer. You're going to need to make yourself a bunch of these little wooden wedges. I'm going to show you these in detail, show you how to make them. You can make 100 of those in 10 minutes. You're going to need a glue gun, hot melt glue gun. And of course you're going to need your thickness planer. Let's get our tools ready and let's make this board flat. First, we need to make some small wooden wedges. They're not very big. I make them out of a 1/2 inch thick piece of wood, and I'll show you how to make a whole bunch of these right now. If you're anything like me, you have lots of scrap hanging around your shop. This is one of those times I'm glad I do. I'm going to take this small piece of scrap, and I'm going to use it to make the wedges that I'll use for flattening boards. I do that by simply ripping off a thin strip. And I prefer to do this on the bandsaw rather than the table saw. With pieces this small, I find the bandsaw is a little safer. I'll show you how that's done.
This is actually so easy, I decided not to waste your time with a lot of video. Just take that small thin piece you ripped from the scrap, touch it to the end of the sander, sand it to a feather edge, cut off a few inches, and do it again and again and again.
Once we have the board and the sled, put the board on the sled, and the first thing you need to do is check its level to see if it's flat. This particular piece looks flat, but if you'll notice this gap right down here at the bottom, when I push down, the gap goes away. It's not much of a gap. It's only a few thousandths of an inch. But that's where these little wedges come in handy. All I have to do is put a wedge under that gap until the gap goes away. Now when I push down, the board doesn't move. Now you'll need to do this all the way around the workpiece. Be sure that an opposite corner doesn't move, to be sure the middle of it doesn't move, and remember these boards will flex as they go through the planer. So you need to put wedges all the way along the length of the board, not just at the corners.
Now's the time to glue all those parts in place. We'll apply a little glue to each one of the wedges, and that simply holds the wedge to the workpiece. Also put some glue at the front and the back of the board, and that holds the board to the sled while it's going through the planer. I've been asked why I cut the component pieces before flattening. Wouldn't it be faster to just flatten the 8-foot board and then not have to flatten each individual piece? The answer to that question is actually complex. First, we all know what happens when you rip a 2x4 down its center. It pinches at the outfeed. The stress in the fibers is released, and the boards twist and warp. Flattening that board before cutting is just a waste of time. But here's the real secret. Here's an imaginary 8-foot long 2x8. It's bowed from end to end by 1/2 inch. Taking that 1/2 inch out is extremely difficult because of the length of the board, and once you do that, you only have a board that's 1 inch thick rather than its original 1.5 inch thick. But what if I only need a 2-foot length of the board? When I cut that, I would expect it to be bowed by 1/4 inch, but it's not. The total bow from end to end on this 2-foot piece is only 1/32 of an inch, and that's a lot easier to remove. Now it's time to actually make the board flat. Take that sled with the board mounted to it and run it through the planer a couple of times. 2 small passes should be enough to get it down to flat. Once the top side is flat, simply remove the board from the sled. Clean off any of the excess glue that's left behind on the workpiece, and feed it through the planer with the unfinished side up. This will make the two faces parallel to one another, and you can now take it down to whatever thickness you want it to be.
That's it. You're done. The board is flat, both sides are parallel to one another, and the board is of a uniform thickness over its whole length. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll join us again on the next episode of the Oxford Woodworker.